Hi everyone, welcome. This bin that you see out here on the bench, ready to go, is one of my worm bins. It's a bin that's got red wigglers in it. It's been in service for 48 days now, and it's received 3 feedings. The most recent feeding was 10 days ago when we placed pumpkin in here. That most recent feeding is marked with this piece of coffee filter, showing us where we last fed. And it was 10 days prior to that, 20 days ago, that we fed cabbage on the opposite end. And at this point, the only piece that I expect to find is maybe a little bit of that stem piece of the head of cabbage. Last week, there was still a good amount of it left, but it was getting pretty squishy, and, who knows? Maybe we'll see a little bit of it, maybe not. Oh yeah, the other thing that we placed in here alongside the cabbage, when we put it in there originally, was the leftovers of the first feeding. That was actually down the middle. It wasn't really part of what we're doing now, which is this back and forth kind of approach to feeding. We adopted the name ping-pong. I think we've used flip-flop. You get the idea that we're just alternating the feeding, going side to side, and this gives us a greater amount of time for just allowing that feeding to sit so that we feed elsewhere, and then we can actually check back to see how things are progressing. I don't know, somehow the feedings in here have been a little bit, I don't know, kind of boring. So I thought I'd try to dress it up a little bit and venture into the forbidden foods area of the worm diet. Most people will tell you, hey, worms are awfully flexible, disregard what you hear on the web and stuff like that. They'll pretty much eat anything. And I tend to go along with that, So I don't really worry about giving them citrusy stuff. You see examples of it everywhere, that they'll eat something like this orange. It's got a big pile of mold growing on it. It looks like the mold has actually made itself in and started taking advantage of the moisture in there. It's kind of dry in there. It's weird. This lemon, too, is quite dry on the outside now, but it's got a good amount of the original moisture. It was never really breached by any mold or anything like that. And this, as you could probably tell just from its appearance, is what remains of a pineapple that I ate not too long ago. I did my best to keep it all intact as one single material. I guess what's sitting inside is some of the inner core that I shaved out of it, but I did sort of open the thing up when I opened it and ate it in such a way that I didn't really remove any pieces of it as I opened it up. So it's kind of a whole object, and I thought it might be interesting to use this as part of our feeding today. I've also got a few days worth of coffee filters here that we're going to include as bedding to go along with the feeding. And the last thing that you see over here is just a little collection of pulverized eggshell. It's the grit of choice in my wormery, in most cases. So let's get these things out of here. I'll slip on a glove and we can get to work. The pineapple was frozen, but the lemon and the orange were never frozen. They're such a nice citrusy, orangey, lemony smell over here right now in my wormery with these things sitting here cut open. Let's see. Little guy's trying to get away. Here's another little guy. Let's see if we can get them off the paper so we can peek in underneath. See how our feeding of pumpkin is coming along. With the stem included, I believe this thing was sticking up out of the bedding last time we checked in here, so I'm not sure what to expect. But then again, it is pumpkin, which is something that the worms tend to devour quite quickly. So I wonder if it's possible that we might find only the stem. I don't know. There was a good amount of pumpkin thrown in here, so my guess is we'll find some leftovers. Let's see. I guess the other thing we could do is we could use one of those new coffee filters to mark the feeding area. And we could use that one that we just removed as our feeding zone indicator and use that as bedding instead. Now, where is the stem? There it is. Okay. So I had pointed the stem into the bin, and then the piece of attached pumpkin, the fleshy part of it, was aiming in this direction. Did we try to obscure it or something? It looks like there's a coffee filter almost like enveloping this end of it, oddly enough. I wonder if we were trying to delay its consumption by the worms by hiding it from them. I mean, you can't hide much from the worms. They'll squeak into anywhere and find the food and gobble it up, but they have managed to leave a little bit of leftovers here. And there's a little bit of leftover, not much, on the stem itself. What do we got here? Just little fragments of leftover, or is there more? Oh, we've got more coffee filter with leftovers smeared on it. Alright, what's this? I guess the coffee filters came in with the coffee itself, because I believe that's what I'm seeing right there. So not a whole lot of leftovers here. That's pretty cool. But we're not going to disrupt it anymore. I'd like to just kind of put it back and let it continue as is. We've already disrupted it quite considerably, though, you got to admit. But I'd like to just kind of put it back where it was and let it continue. And when we check in here next time, I just got this feeling that this is going to be nowhere. And we can kind of help to continue hiding it a little bit the way we found it. Sort of folded over and leaning up against the stem, but I don't know, I just got this feeling it's going to be history pretty soon. So, there we go. Then we could just cover back up. It looks like, yeah, there's just bedding everywhere. This is still primarily bedding, I would say. You know, it's not even 2 months old, this system, month and a half old or so. So it's still just mainly the materials that we used to build it. I believe that this is the system that I was a little bit surprised at when I came in here to feed the very first time, and yeah, this is the one. It just felt so weird to have to dig for so long to get to the very, very bottom. So we did start the system with a tremendous amount of initial bedding, and to add more today is certainly not necessary, as you could see, but we will anyway. Because that's just been my theme lately. I've just been really generous with the bedding lately, piling it in. Ooh, I smell cabbage. I've been trying to pile it in as much as I can, everywhere I can, when it's sensible to do so. So I could smell it, and I thought I felt something, and I wonder if this could be it right here. It certainly has the right color, and it kind of has the anticipated texture. No, okay, you know what this is? I could tell because of the skin. The skin is the part that the worms struggle with, and they'll work it down eventually too, but it's the soft fleshy part of the kiwi on the inside that I was mistaking as possibly being leftover cabbage. Oh, here we go. They were right next to each other. It's coming down. It's probably about half the mass that it was last time. And there's worms enjoying it. So, since we fed pumpkin last time on that side, this is the target side for today's feeding. And I'm trying to remember what else was placed in here. The kiwi came from feeding number 1, so it's kind of a transplant. Really, the cabbage is the only native feeding that was placed in here. And I don't think that there's really any other leftover of that cabbage. It's just amazing that even the stem has any leftovers. So I think what we can do is keep those two objects together and maybe pick one side or the other, and then we'll use the other side to put today's feeding in. Then they could live side by side. This will give us the ability to check in on the progress of both as time progresses. So let's start using some of these coffee filters. Let's use this one at the end to cover up with. We'll just put it off on the side. But let's go get the one that's been in service now for a while and start with that. And get this thing in here with the old coffee filter combined with the old foods. Continue down here. And then alongside it, we'll have a little bit more paper that we can make use of here. Some of these new things. Why don't we follow this theme of having things sort of nested within bedding or paper. It seemed like the pumpkin was sort of set up that way, so we'll place those citrusy objects over on one side, and then I don't even know if it's going to fit, but we'll try to place that pineapple skin or husk or peel, or I don't know what they call it, into the other paper. That's pretty cool, and I think as the juices start to flow out of all of these frozen chunks of pineapple, it's going to emit a good amount of moisture, especially this middle piece of it. So inside is where I placed, there's like a middle fibrous core to one of these things. So if you ever eat it, you usually eat the the softer bits on the outside, and the inner part is usually discarded. So that's what's on the inside. And I think as far as bedding goes, I think those couple of coffee filters, that's a sufficient contribution for today's feeding. I'd like for this to be submerged, but I'd like for it to also be kind of still in that form that it's in right now. When I sort of pulled out all the parts of it in the middle that I ate, and then I folded back everything that was coming in here. Because I want to see how that looks next time we come in here. I'm curious what the worms are going to make of it. That too is citrus, technically, I believe, and it too has citric acid in it. And if you don't know about why they consider citrus foods as the forbidden foods in worm bins, it's because of that acid. But I just have this feeling that, you know, the acid, oh, you know what? The acid topic reminds me, and I think it's not too late. I usually have this point of no return when I don't want to excavate the work that I did. But this stuff is, it's like the opposite of acidic. It's basic, I don't know, alkaline. It's got the ability to neutralize acid. So sometimes people like to include it with more acidic feedings. So besides being a chemical complement in that whole acidic and basic scale, pH, it's the texture of it is also something that the worms make use of in their gizzards. They've got gizzards rather than stomachs, and instead of using acid to break down foods in their stomachs, in their gizzards, they use mechanical grinding action of muscles to break down the foods they eat. A little different from the way you and I digest our foods. So the tiny minuscule fragments of hard material that you use as grit in your worm bins help the worms process their foods in their gizzards. Okay, things are looking pretty good in here. We'll just start getting all these coverings right back on the way we found them. I think everything's in order. I'm just questioning whether I want to return that last covering, that cardboard covering. Sometimes I find that if I start stacking up too many coverings onto a system, it somehow begins to attract the little gnats and stuff. So I thought that that's what I was seeing here. And sometimes I wonder if the gnats are actually making their way into these little holes in the corrugated and then utilizing the moisture down in the system. So I think I'm going to pull this out of the mix here, and we're going to return the system to the shelf just like this. It's going to make the top surface of the bin over here where the moisture recirculates not quite as dark and homey, but you know, at nighttime, even during the daytime, it's not so bright in here. The worms will enjoy hanging out there regardless of what time of day it is, so we don't have to worry about you know, the lack of darkness affecting things here. Everything will be just fine. So that's it for my 48-day red wiggler worm bin. Now I didn't see the cork, did you? All right, everyone, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go, and if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. All right, have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching.